Hey there, it's your host, Jacqueline. I am one who usually focuses on the brain and how thoughts mixed with taking manifesting actions speed up the manifestation process with receiving your desires. However, today's episode is going to be a little bit different. My guest, Victoria, and I recorded this podcast in May 2020 when the world was going through troubling times with our health. But since then, especially in America, more serious issues on top of the serious issue of our health also have our attention. We are living in troubling times at the moment. I would be lying to you if I didn't say I spent most of the morning crying over everything that is happening lately. Even though it seems there is so much bad happening in the world right now, there are truly really a lot of good souls who want to support each other as a collective community through love, happiness, and equality in all realms of our lives. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel whatever you are feeling right now. But you still have to take care of yourself first and foremost in order to truly be able to help others during these troubling times. Your self-care is the backbone to everything you do. In order to make positive changes in your life, you've got to have a full cup of self-care and self-love to use your energy wisely. And this is why Victoria and I decided to record this episode, because we want to help you. Today, you're going to learn how to use your heart's intelligence system in order to feel better and adjust your focus. Of course, your brain is connected to your heart, so everything does work together simultaneously. But we want to give you some helpful tips and methods that help us to lessen our anxiety and focus on positive moments during any and every troubling time that occurs in this thing we call life. What you focus on expands. So for right now, take a long, deep breath and let's focus on your heart's intelligence system so you know how to use it to lessen your fears, your anxiety, and your stress going forward. You are a powerful creator, and you have so much more power than you realize right now. Are you ready to unleash it for your soul's highest happiness? This is the Manifest It podcast.
Move with the rhythm, shake it up, stop when the clock hits 13. Sing 1, 2, 3, 4. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.
Today, I have a very talented poet and artist with me, Victoria Walkden. Thank you so much for coming on, Victoria. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me.
You live in the UK. I live in the United States. Right now, for the last couple of months, we've been kind of bound to our homes more than usual, given the pandemic that's going on. How are you doing over there?
It kind of depends which day you ask me. Some days I do okay. I really do. And I'm proud of myself. And other days get really, really, really anxious. And I think it really depends how I commit to my day. If I watch too much news or if I spend hours scrolling through social media or whatever, then it's really, really easy to feel anxious and to get into that state. Whereas if there's a day when I'm meditating and going in nature and eating well, and then probably a lot less anxious.
I'm an introvert. I love being at home. So overall, it hasn't really affected me too much. However, I've noticed in the beginning when we all started staying at home, I had the news on all the time. I live with anxiety. And even though I have anxiety, I'm still able to use the law of attraction really well. But I found that I was playing into my anxieties by having the news on all the time. So now I don't actually keep the TV on the news all day. I've told myself, this is the situation, and I'm going to choose to focus elsewhere for my well-being and, my sanity. And I want to keep the panic attacks, So I don't focus so much on what's going on, although I still stay connected to it. Have you noticed from the beginning of this whole thing of being on lockdown, quote, I use it in quotes because for me, I love being in my house, but for you, have you noticed how you've changed your habitual home behaviors from the beginning of this up until now, or is it pretty much the same routine?
It has changed. I've become a lot more strict about my routine and my habits. For example, I've been waking up quite early, which I kind of tend to do in the spring and summer anyway. But rather than just trying to get back to sleep, I'd be getting up and making coffee and having a meditation. And really small things have made a difference. I love fresh coffee, obsessed with it. And so while I'm making my fresh coffee, while it's brewing, I should say, I've been doing my stretches, just some, pretty basic stretches, which I wasn't doing before. It's now become a habit. So it's every day I come down and put the kettle on and get the coffee out. It's brewing. I do my stretching. Then I meditate, drink my coffee. And it's a great start to the day. And although in the past I've done it, kind of do it sometimes and not other times, whereas during this pandemic, I found I've had to do it to keep my mental health stable, because the start of the day is so crucial, isn't it?
Yeah.
How you start your routine, right? And I haven't been especially strict about how I meditate. Generally, I just sort of do some deep breathing and, that sort of thing. And I am still journaling, very much so, but I'm not quite so strict about that. It depends what comes out of the meditation. If I'm feeling more anxious than usual, I found I've really had to stick to that in particular. And also going out in nature regularly. That doesn't have to be a daily thing, though. As long as I do that like every other day, just go for a walk in nature alone.
Do you feel that, because like over here in the United States, we're bombarded with our president coming on the TV every day and like giving up his own updates. Yeah, that was shade thrown at him. Over in the UK, like, do you feel that everyone is still like nervous about this virus? Because over here in the United States, I live in Texas. To be completely honest, I went and got my car inspected yesterday. I wore a mask, but I only saw one other person the entire time I was out wearing a mask. Our numbers are going higher since we've reopened as a state. I feel like the general consensus, at least in Texas, I live in the Dallas area, they don't seem to be fearing that they could catch this virus. How is it for you over there in the UK right now?
Okay, so I live in a town. I wouldn't say it was a small town, but it's neither a big town. It's Stratford upon Avon. I don't know if you know, Shakespeare was born here and buried here, I should say.
I love
Yeah. And where we live is just on the outskirts. So I'm literally looking at fields right now out my window.
Oh, nice.
So we're literally on the edge of the town, which is fantastic because we can walk into nature without.
When I look out my windows here in Dallas, I see a bunch of concrete, so I'm jealous.
Oh. Yeah, well, it's one of the reasons we moved here, because it was such an amazing location. We were really lucky it came up. So I think the younger generations are more blasé in general about, you tend to see groups of younger people hanging about, but getting close to each other when they're not supposed to. I think the older generations are a lot stricter and a lot more aware and conscious of taking this seriously. Some people wear masks, but not many. I mean, not that I've been out much at all, but especially these past couple of weeks, we've had some really good weather and lots of people heading to the beaches. While they're keeping some distance, there's still a lot of people on the beaches. So I think it's mixed. I think it really depends on what parts of the UK. Like in London, I think maybe because London's such a big city, people are used to being close. And they were showing pictures of people in Hyde Park. Hyde Park's one of the big parks in London. And people sunbathing, they got like bikinis on and everything.
Yeah, I saw the protest rally last weekend. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, that was a lot smaller than the media gave it credit for,
Yeah, but that's why I wanted to ask you this, because obviously we're spiritual types. We believe in the law of attraction, and we know that perception is reality. And so when the media gives off a certain perception, that's the whole reason why I wanted to ask you, because over here in Texas, at least, especially the Dallas area, I'm going out, I'm doing my thing. It's not so much a generational, at least from what I've witnessed yesterday, because I really do stay at home, but yesterday I went out, and there wasn't like one particular demographic or any type of behavior that had a pattern for me, which is weird because I always look for patterns and everything. The older people and the younger people were not wearing masks. So I feel like the general, I don't want to speak for everybody, but from what I've perceived, because perception is reality, it seems like people think that the worst is over. And like you said, the rallies that I saw on Twitter, people were really angry about these rallies that happened over the park area, because we're on different sides of the pond. I just love to get your feeling of what you think the majority of the people in your area. I know you can't speak for everybody, but
a majority of them take it seriously, I would say. I mean, when I talk about younger generations, that's a bit generalizing. A lot of the young people are very sensible. There's always like just some groups, isn't it? Gathering, having barbecues and stuff like that. But yeah, in general, I think people have been taking it seriously and being really good about it, to be fair. Our neighborhood has been fantastic. We set up, one of my neighbors set up a WhatsApp group just for our street. So when it first happened and the rules were a lot stricter, we were really looking out for each other and buying food for each other if we needed it. And it was just great. It was really, really great. We don't need it so much now because the rules have loosened a little bit. I think the picture that the media painted is quite different. I'm not saying it's not like that everywhere, but here, I mean, it's obviously serious. It's something to be taken seriously. I kind of, on a spiritual level, I have a different kind of thought pattern about it, if that makes sense.
I don't know if the listeners know, I work with physicists at university. I have a lot of science that I get exposed to all the time. I am a spiritual person because I believe anything and everything can exist all at one time. As you being a spiritual being, what is your take on all that?
Okay, so in a nutshell, I love how science and spirituality merge. So I'm fascinated by numbers like you are, like the golden ratio, the golden sequence, Fibonacci, if I'm saying that right, torus field our energy field, quantum physics and all that. And I mean, I'm not really clever enough to understand it. At the same time, I'm fascinated by it. And I'm also fascinated about, not to the point that I need to study it. I suppose it just fascinates me, is, about cells and atoms, and like we're made up of mostly water. And, the more you kind of go down that rabbit hole, the more you're like, well, what is disease? How can the body get disease if, when you really look into under a microscope of what the body actually is?
Yeah, because the viruses and diseases, they obviously exist just as much as healthy atoms and particles. Those exist as well, healthy cells. Perception is reality. And yes, it is true. People get sick. I mean, we all get sick with flu and colds and things like that. Overall, I'm handling this whole pandemic thing really well. But yeah, I'm not going to lie. I was nervous yesterday going out into public. It's so much like, how do you keep the anxiety monsters? We're at home a lot more. There's days of the hustle and bustle and the day-to-day that usually keeps us distracted from self-aware. How are you doing your self-awareness on a mental?
Okay, it's such a great question, and my answer is going to sound a little bit woo-woo, a little bit out there to some people. To others it might not. In a nutshell, if I just narrow it down to one thing, I listen to my heart space. Some people are going to totally understand that, totally get that, and others are going to go, what's she on about, you know? Or,
is the heart space kind of the same thing as the soul?
yes, and it's all sort of part and parcel, really. And I think that for me, the heart, listening to my heart, is listening to that voice that guides me, takes me down the safe road, takes me down the more joyful road, the more loving road, or whatever. So, you know, in a really simplistic approach or idea, you've got this fork. In every moment, you kind of got, in essence, a fork. Well, there's obviously got more options than that. You've got infinite options, but, you know, just to really simplify it, you can either kind of react to your fear, or you can, you know, react to your heart, what your heart is telling you to do. This is why slowing down focus is so important, because you've got to keep listening. You've got to keep listening to that voice. What my heart's saying to me is, it's not that the danger isn't there. It's just she's telling me what to do to avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit like
you're choosing to have an empowering response rather than just reacting to all of the noises going on around you with regards to what's happening in the world at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, she's saying stay away from busy places. I mean, going very rarely, but occasionally I've been into town to pick up some bread from the bakery, and it feels horrible. You know, like nobody, you know, there's not many people anyway, but those that are there, you know, they don't smile at each other, or rarely, and it's very stressful because everyone has to stay so many meters apart. It's just not an enjoyable experience. So, you know, she's saying just do what you need to do, get the bread, get out as quick as possible, just leave. Don't stay in any situation, whether it's in your head or in physical, you know, reality or whatever, any longer than you need to. Is going to bring your vibration down, and it's going to bring your, you know, your joy down. It's just going to make you feel like crap.
Like you said when we were talking offline, like there's a lot of similarities to what we're going through, even though we live on opposite sides of the pond. Some people may feel alone right now. So like that's kind of the whole reason why we wanted to do this podcast, is because we want to encourage you as a soul and as a being, as a creator. You know, Abraham Hicks says we're creators of our reality, which is true, because I choose to believe that, right? I mean, like you said, like you don't want to put yourself in a situation where it would bring down your alignment or your high vibration, but yet you're aware of what's going on. You're just choosing not to entertain it for any longer than necessary. Okay, like some people might say, well, this person over here is sick and this person over, and it's not saying that we're denying helping other people. It's just in order to help other people, we have to be able to make sure we take care of ourselves, so we can use our energy in a wonderful way to help others. For us, at least today, our podcast this is our way of being able to help others, given the fact that we have to be physically distant from other people. I know you said, like, in general, most people in your area are taking it very seriously, but do you think a lot of people, like when you said you went and got the bread, they weren't smiling at each other? Do you think people are operating from fear-based levels, or do you think
Yeah, and I think a good example is in our town, we have a Facebook group, which in many ways is fantastic, because if you want to share some information, let's say there's a traffic jam, or, you know, other useful information that everybody can benefit from, you know, they put stuff on there. And before all this, there was always the odd person who put some complaint or other about something, you know, but you're like, oh, whatever. But of course, since the pandemic, it's got worse. So, you know, people actually putting messages in that group saying they saw this person do this, and, you know, getting more bitchy, I think, is probably what I'm saying. But I think that's probably not surprising, because stress levels are really high. You know, everybody's confused. The government's not really, they don't know what they're doing, do they? Let's face it. So, you know, stress levels are high, and the only way really is to not engage with that. And while I can understand people want to vent, it's just not productive, is it? I mean, if you're conscious at any level, you have to see that that's not productive, just to go online and start ranting. I mean, Twitter, I find, no disrespect to Twitter, because it, you know, it has a lot of great stuff about it as well.
It's a hostile social.
Yeah. And there's some wonderful tweets on there, but at the same time, oh my goodness, it's people are just using it to vent their stress. And I just don't think they realize the effect it's having on their own life and around.
Yeah.
And
but I feel like what we're going through is what we were talking about earlier, is this is a time where we're kind of forced to self-reflect about how our patterns and our behaviors are. What do you do each day? I know that for a fact because I've seen myself switch gears in the last couple of weeks, because like I said, at the beginning, I was glued to the TV, wanting to watch the news all the time. But then I found myself crying and like just when John Prine and like all these other people started getting like good-souled, good-hearted people, when they start getting sick. Again, even on Twitter, there's tweets all the time about these family members. And if you submerge yourself in it too much, then like you said, it bring your vibration down. So to want the listeners to understand that what we're saying today is it's not selfish to take care of your well-being and yourself first, because again, it's so hard to help other people when you don't take care of yourself first. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And like one of the amazing ways of taking care of yourself is, I've read your books. You have really good books. Your poetry is amazing. I want our listeners to hear more about why you wrote your book. What's your first book? Tell us.
Okay. The first one is called I Love and I Forgive. It is in essence about loving yourself and forgiving yourself as well as others, but predominantly loving and forgiving yourself, because if you don't, and you don't have to, but if you had a traumatic past, which let's face it, most people have had some kind of trauma at different levels, haven't they? I mean, this is one right now in the middle of, isn't it? I mean,
like you said earlier, we all experience similarities. So all of us at some point in our lives have gone through something that is extremely hard. Yeah.
I mean, the whole Me Too movement, that was extraordinary. And with that, at first, I didn't really agree with it exactly at first. And then through my own healing journey, I came to accept that actually I was part of the Me Too movement as well. So I think that was some denial going on there for me. Mm-hmm. So the healing journey is so layered, I think. Because sometimes we don't even know, we've buried trauma or pain or whatever so deeply.
Yeah, through distractions that, like our normal hustle and bustle lives that we had before this pandemic started.
Exactly.
It was a great way to have noise around us and distract us. And ever since we were told to stay at home, a lot of us are reflecting on ourselves and our lives, and it can be quite scary for some. And that's why I love your books. In this book, you're saying that it's the healing journey from something traumatic. And then as you go through the book, I obviously know everyone has their own journey, right? I know how the book really benefited me. And I'm such a thinker, I love the brain and the mindset. And you come from a place of your heart. And I just found that it was such a wonderful balance. It was like the yin to my yang,
That's so awesome.
You do such a great job with your poetry and how you express yourself, because you remind people like me who focus on thoughts all the time. You have like such a calming and polishing way of talking about going through hard times and accepting that, it's okay to go through this healing journey. You're going to be okay. Keep talking about this book, because it really is such a really wonderful read, by the way, because people need to read it. It's on Amazon. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hijack you.
No, it's fine. Thank you so much for your kind words.
I just had to express how great it is that you introduce heartfelt focus when I come from a world where I'm constantly thinking about the brain and the mind. And so share some more with us.
Okay, so I still am, but I used to be very much in my headspace as well. Very much. In fact, I used to have a business in the computer industry. I had a web design business.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I was never like a programmer or anything. I was a designer, but I had my own business. So 3 years ago, I started writing poetry. It wasn't a decision. It was really strange because I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. When was it? 10 years ago, 9 years ago. I tried to work, but eventually I had to give up my conventional work. I've had up and down years. And basically 3 years ago, I was really struggling with it. So I took up meditation daily. That's when the poems started coming through, which was so weird for me because if you'd asked anybody, I did an art degree when I was younger. So I've always been a creative, but I was never a poet. I think I wrote like one poem in my life 20 years ago. Before this, it was like my heart, my soul really wanted me to get out of my headspace.
Mm-hmm.
The only way I could do that is via meditation because I had to get quiet. So I had to slow down all those thoughts to be able to hear it, because it's so true. When I talk about my heart space, it's such a gentle voice that if your head is like, oh, you know, you've got all these thoughts raging and, oh my God, panic, fear, whatever, you're not going to hear that loving, gentle voice, right? And it was challenging because like my soul was saying, you've got to sit here and you've got to meditate at least 20 minutes. I resisted it. I did. I literally got angry some days. I don't want to do this, you know, like a little child. All these poems just like came out, just flowed out of me like a waterfall, like multiple poems daily. And if I'm honest, a lot of them didn't make sense at the time. I was like, okay, I don't even know what that means. And then 2 years later, when my consciousness had shifted, you know, on the healing journey, I was like, oh no, I totally get that. It's almost like I was leaving a breadcrumb trail for myself.
Who you truly are as an individual and as a soul being. Did it take 2 years for you to start noticing it, or was it just something that expanded and intensified over time?
Yeah, the latter. Yeah. So it's gradual. It's like any journey, isn't it?
Yeah.
I
That's
mean,
how it was for me too. Even though you're choosing to focus a heartfelt area, which is feelings and emotions, even those are tied to your brain. Even though you're saying, oh, I have to get out of my headspace, really and truly, you're shifting your headspace and you're shifting it into what you choose to focus on. And that is, you know, the saying, what you choose to focus on expands. Everything stems from your brain. But I love how in your book, you do talk about your heart and your soul and how we're human and it's okay to be human. It's okay not to be perfect. Even through your wonderful poetry, the messages that you convey tell you that, you know what, your brain is super important because, at least for me, this is how I interpreted it. Your brain is super important, but it doesn't have to rule you. You rule your brain via your heart and your soul, and centered as a soul being from that area. That's why I really love that book, because you literally like tell the reader, you're good enough as you are. You're okay. Anything that happened to you already, you're allowed to let it go, and you're allowed to be nice to yourself, and you're allowed to love yourself. And you do it through emotion and feeling, which I think, like I said, is the yin to my yang, because I focus everything through thought. Bringing this back to what you said earlier about how we're all going through similar experiences. That's true. You may focus on a certain angle of a certain situation, but really and truly, like you said, if you just live everything through love.
I just want to state something that I don't know a lot about this yet, but it's something, again, I'm fascinated in, is that there's a growing evidence that the heart has its own intelligence.
Mm-hmm. And
the torus, our energy field, is supposed to, I believe, my understanding is it expands from our chest outwards. I believe our heart actually has not its own intelligence, because obviously we're one being. And
right, because, you know, our brain goes on autopilot, and that's how humans like to function. Let's be honest here. We love to be on autopilot. We don't want to have to think. We don't want to have to, you know, change our habits and our behaviors. Would you say that the heart has its own intelligence system, in the sense that maybe the heart also has a way of kind of being on autopilot?
I think the heart space, I call it that, is the greater consciousness. The thoughts in our heads, we've been taught in this lifetime, and patterns, beliefs, you know, we've learned all that on a timeline. But in a heart space is like the far greater consciousness of everything. And that's why, for me anyway, my heart is always telling me to meditate and go into, sink into the abyss, which is often is a theme that comes through a lot of my poetry, is just to go into that space of nothing, really, because it takes you out of your too obsessed with certain thoughts. Like fear is a very contractual energy, isn't it? It's like, oh my God, panic, and I freeze, and I've really experienced that firsthand with having rheumatoid arthritis. And I'm aware and conscious that on an energetic level, that's pretty much what's happened to me. I've been very fearful, and it's kind of felt it in my joints, like in this trap, like bound, Anyone with arthritis will probably relate to that. My heart is like saying, okay, just see the bigger picture. Come out of your fear for a moment and see this way bigger picture. And because when you're in the bigger picture space, you can see things from different angles, and that's where your power is. So fear is like you have this one-dimensional kind of viewpoint of something. Oh my God, I'm going to go to the supermarket, and if I don't wear a mask, I'm going to get COVID and I'm going to die. That's quite extreme, but that's what a lot of people are thinking, and it brings your vibration down. So if you can step out of that for a minute and say, well, actually, there's infinite options here. If I get into my greater consciousness state, or my heart space, as I call it.
I call it like your soul's compass or your soul's nudging.
Right.
Soul's
guidance. We all have different names. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I personally just call it my heart space, I guess, because it's love. To me, it's loving, because it's saying, you know what? You have so many more options here than that.
Like you say, you live your life from love, through love. And that's why I like the heart space. You're saying when you choose to follow your heart space in what it tells you, then you realize.
Well, I think the word love is misconstrued, if that's the word, or it's like people may think of it in romantic ways, or that love is all about, I don't know, like softness and tenderness, which it is, don't get me wrong. Unconditional love is saying, if you just rest in this space of nothing, or whatever you want to call it, just be at peace just for a minute with everything, just don't react to everything that's going on, just be at peace and just observe, just watch, just witness in that space, then you have so much more power. You can start playing with this experience in a much calmer, more peaceful way, and you can go, oh my God, okay, that thought that is really dragging me down, that thought over there. It's almost like you could see it as a screen, and
you're choosing to respond in an empowering way when you operate from your heart space.
Exactly. And so, yes, it is about love and gentleness and tenderness. That's because when you're in that peaceful place, you feel more gentle and tender and loving, don't you? You're like, okay, I'm more relaxed now, and I'm going to treat myself better, and I'm going to give myself better thoughts, and I'm going to treat other people better, and so on and so on and so on. But when you're in a fearful state, you're like, oh my God, I just want to like take it out on someone.
Like you feel out of control. And yesterday when I was, in public and I saw people weren't wearing their mask, even though I chose to wear a mask, I wasn't looking at them and going, oh my God, they're gonna freaking get sick. It wasn't like that. It was just more like, that's what they've chosen to do. I send them positive, loving, happy vibes. I'm going to focus on getting my car inspected. But it doesn't mean that I don't care about them or that I need to do something in order to adjust my surroundings, because in the laws of physics, energy is everywhere and it's chaotic. It's not a, sequential order of things in our universe. It really and truly is on how you choose to focus. That's why I love your first book, because you talk about how people are allowed to heal themselves from their own thought patterns, from their own ways of feeling and emotions. And you teach them through your words and your poetry that you're fine. You don't have to beat yourself up over having these thoughts. Let's focus on expanding your heart space and expanding all the things that you are, because you're amazing as you are. at least that helped me when I was reading it to remind myself, because I am a recovering perfectionist. I say recovering.
Me too. Yeah.
It helped me to remind myself that, you know what, it's okay. I'm doing an amazing job. I'm a human being. I love myself because I'm part of Mother Nature. And I love how you tie in Mother Nature with a lot of your poetry.
Yeah, exactly. And we were talking about patterns earlier and how you're fascinated by patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you see them everywhere in nature, right?
Yes. The Fibonacci sequence.
But I think also these patterns, when you're in that state of looking for the patterns and the numbers and so forth, I think it's great because it shows that you're in that state of consciousness where you're conscious that...
I was going to say there's a bigger picture at play.
Yeah, absolutely. And that your current reality doesn't have to hold power over you.
Right, yeah.
Because you're looking, you are the observer, that the one who is focusing, you can focus on what is going on around you, or you can just focus on what's making you afraid. That constant kind of stepping back, if that's the right phrase, of reassessing and remembering that you are not your reality, and you're not your reality because you can change your thoughts.
It's like you said earlier with the fork, even though there's infinite possibilities, you are correct. Like, most of the time, us humans, we relate choices to a fork in the road because we all go through hard times in life. And yeah, right now, this is a trying time for many people with the pandemic going on. But I think it's also a gift to us. Let me explain this, because I know it's not a gift that people get sick and die, but I just mean, I think it's a gift for us ourselves as individuals to be able to reflect and say, okay, I want to change this because I don't want to have these thoughts anymore. I don't want to entertain this emotion anymore. That fork that you were referring to, our vantage point is our reality. So at any time we can say enough is enough, and we're not going to entertain our fears any longer. And that right there is like the most empowering choice that one could make.
Yeah. But I think that it's going back to trauma and the healing journey. When you're in that state of suppressing some trauma, so you could be in a state of denial, for example, or you're in survival mode, which a lot of people have been and they didn't even realize it, still are.
Yeah.
Because day by day you're like suppressing whatever you're suppressing, you're not able to step back and see that you have more power, and there's a greater consciousness, and that you have choice of thoughts. And especially for people with families, I take my hat off to people with kids who, especially with all the homeschooling, oh my goodness, working and homeschooling at the same time. So in fairness, I would imagine that would be very challenging to take time out to meditate and do all that.
What is your advice for the listeners right now? Because again, Manifest It, my whole brand is all about thought and manifesting through thoughts. You're heart-centered. What is your advice to the listeners right now and going forward once the pandemic is over? What is your advice for them that could be like a blueprint for their heart center?
It's difficult to give just one piece of advice for everybody, because it's, everybody's journey is so unique, isn't it? And it's going to sound cheesy, but I do think love and forgiveness is the answer, and in any form that suits the individual best, because forgiveness is a way of letting go. I know for me, when I started on this journey, and I was going to say guided, but I was actually pushed by my soul to forgive myself, forgive certain friends and family. I never considered, I was at that consciousness state at the time, I never considered self-forgiveness. It just never occurred to me. I don't know, has it ever occurred to you?
It never occurred to me until I gave myself permission to do it.
It was always, to me, for some reason, I had this belief that forgiveness was about forgiving others.
Exactly. And I always thought forgiving them meant that they were excused from their behavior.
Right. When I realized there was such a thing as self-forgiveness, I was like, oh, okay, so what? I've got to forgive myself. How does that work? So I started researching it and reading books about it and things like that. And I discovered that it really is, in essence, a way of letting go of burdens and pain and suffering. So I can actually let go of my suffering. And that was a whole new journey, because it's like, it doesn't just happen overnight, or at least it didn't for me. Maybe
because
it does.
It's habitual thought patterns that you're changing. Really and truly, like all the hustle and bustle of our lives, we don't think about how our thought patterns are just that. They're patterns, they're habitual, built up patterns. Me, when I realized, oh, I could forgive my suffering, forgive myself for all this pain that I'm continuing to harbor. Yeah, it's overwhelming at first.
Absolutely. And the question that struck me is, why would I not want to let go of suffering?
At least for me, and I feel like it's for most people, but it's because it's something that's familiar.
Right. That is definitely one side of it. I agree for myself as well.
Yeah. But I feel like once I had reached that point where you said you realized, oh, I don't have to suffer any longer, I feel like that in itself was, I lifted a boulder off my shoulder when I said to myself that, you know what, I don't have to feel this way or think this way anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's not excusing how people treated you. It's more just, I'm not going to allow it to affect me going forward.
I agree. And
Yeah.
I just want to say right there that your choices, your day-to-day choices will or will not affect your suffering. This is why I think this is what's so interesting about this pandemic, because it's made everybody, apart from the wonderful health workers and key workers, they've, I was about to say it's made everyone slow down, but it hasn't made them slow down.
I know. I know. By the way, as we're doing this podcast, like we want to make sure if you have any questions about the virus or about what you should do, obviously you can consult the CDC and the WHO. I'm a believer in science, so, I like to listen to what the scientists are saying. But yeah, we're not obviously trying to tell you, like, if you think this way, then you're not going, you're going to get the virus. But really and truly, we're just trying to show you that
there's a different way, there's a different perspective.
There's a different perspective in getting through this pandemic. So yeah, I just want to make sure that we put that out there for the listeners.
Exactly. And I think, but for those of us that have been forced to slow down, I think that is a blessing. So like you say, obviously there's a lot of very unfortunate.
Yeah, we're not discarding that at all.
No.
And yes, and like you said, there's not enough gratitude we could give to the health workers and
absolutely
grocery store workers and the delivery drivers and everybody out there right now. We are so grateful for you. There's nothing we could say to express our gratitude.
Exactly.
For us that are slowing down and staying at home more.
I think the importance of that is that it's very challenging, because obviously if you slow down, you've then got to listen to all the thoughts and stuff in your head, right? Okay. But what it does give the opportunity to do, if you go into your heart space or whatever you want to call it, and you meditate and you step back and you go, okay, well, you recognize that these thoughts and these choices you're making second by second, nanosecond by nanosecond every day, where you walk around in the house, how you walk around in the house, and all of these things are building up the picture of your life. I can totally understand why it has to be a journey over so many years, because there's so many layers. And I think, like, I'm 49, so imagine all those years and all those layers. So, you've got to be really super gentle with yourself and really kind and loving, because you've got to go layer upon layer. Even when you maybe change some belief or some pattern, you find another pattern underneath it. Like, oh my God,
That's why, like I say, everything's so interconnected. Not only our organs, but even just our thought patterns and our emotions. Everything's so interconnected.
Absolutely. And, you were talking earlier about how this period has given us the time to reflect. And I've been doing the same. And I look back 10 years ago, for example, and I just feel like such a different person.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't writing poetry. I wasn't painting.
And by the way, she is a painter and she sells her paintings and makes good off of it. You are so talented, Victoria. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. You're very kind.
No, really. And like, you have this line called victorious by nature. I bought one of her shirts and I wear it around the house all the time. I actually wore it for 9 days straight. And then I changed my shirt yesterday. But it's just soft and comfortable. I mean, your books, though, are, if you really want to like learn how to forgive yourself, your books are just, like I said, so calming. Whereas you're the yin to my yang. You touch in and dive into the emotion more. And again, everything's interconnected. You know, when you started taking my courses.
Oh, brilliant. I love your books. I love your books. And yeah, I mean, to be honest, I don't journal every single day, but I journal regularly. Yeah. So almost every day.
And even some people, they don't want to write it down or type it out on a computer. But even if you just stop, again, with the pandemic going on, some of us are having to slow down and be in our homes. It gives us plenty of time to reflect. And even if you don't write it down or type it out, just sitting 5 minutes a day, focusing on what you want to focus on and how you want to feel, it recenters your heart space as you.
Absolutely. And you know, even if you're not ready for that, and I know because I've been at times I haven't been ready for that, and I don't know what I want, you know, excuse me, I bleep myself out there.
Yeah, thank you. I told YouTube and my podcast people that it's a clean show, so thanks.
Yeah. I bleep myself out. But yeah, you know, I've been at times like that where, especially at the beginning of my journaling journey, which was with you, I mean, when we became friends on Facebook.
Yeah, and I did those courses on Facebook.
It was so good. It was really transitionary for me. Does that sound right? Yeah, it was a big transition for me. Like when I first started, and I still do this sometimes, I don't know what to write, and I would just write swear words. I like, if I'm feeling frustrated about something, I would.
Oh, you do like a brain dump. Yeah, I call it a brain dump.
Yeah, and it just doesn't make sense. And it's just full of swear words. And it's like,
believe me. And then when I work with the physicists and I'm in meetings with them, I've done a lot of brain dumps on words and not save the Word document. Yeah. No, I understand.
And you know, but that's the beauty of it. There's no rules. You've got to remember that it's only you watching. So if you're judging yourself, what's that all about? You know,
exactly.
If you don't,
that is so profound. Can you say that one more time?
Okay, so when you're journaling, you are watching yourself. So if you have a problem with anything you're writing down or that you can't write down or whatever, then you're making a judgment about yourself. You are. I think it would be beneficial to really look under that, you know, into that, and ask yourself, well, why don't I want to write that down, or why am I looking at a blank piece of paper? Why can't I even swear on paper or whatever? It's, you know, you are the only person there with your, you know, when you're on your own with your journal, with your pen, you are the only person there. So whatever issues you have, it's all about you. And that's hard. I found that hard. I really did. I still do, because it's your judgment. It's on you, and nobody else is judging you. I mean, it might depend on your religious beliefs, but I think when it's just you in the room and you have problems getting your thoughts on paper or knowing what you want or whatever it is, you know, you maybe need to explore that, because that's holding you back, you know?
Yeah. Once you get it out there, whether it's on paper or on a Word document, or even if you look at yourself in the mirror and you say it out loud to yourself, once you get it out there, that's where I feel like a lot of people, that's the reason why they don't do it, is because they're afraid of the what's next. I am here to say that first time it feels foreign, but then the more you do it, the more you realize it really is a choice. You can get it out there and then continue to hold on to it and harbor it, or you can get it out there and say, you know what, I'm now choosing the opposite, which is ... And I'm lovingly choosing the way I want to think and feel. I mean, like I said, with your poetry, it's polished and it's so finesse the way you basically reach into our heart space and pull it out of us. Well, I'm so proud of you, because I know when we first met online a few years ago and we did the courses on Facebook, you were a little bit shyer, and now I see you as a blossomed business owner in many areas of talents. I just think that you are awesome. You are such a wonderful, wonderful gift to the world and to humanity.
Well,
So
thank you very much. But I
yeah,
mean, you've helped me on my journey, so thank you.
tell the listeners again, like the name of your books, and on Amazon is where you can buy them. How else can we reach you via like your website or social media?
Okay. Well, my website is my name, which is victoriawalkden.com. And via there, you can click on the link to buy my first book. My second book is in production. That will hopefully be available this summer.
It's your third book, because I have two of your published books.
That's true. The first one I've actually just recently, during the pandemic, I took it out of, what do they call it? Took it out of circulation or something?
You unpublished it, yeah.
Unpublished it. Because it was called Dreams Come True.
Yeah.
Actually, this is really poignant. That book, as you know, because you have it, you were one of my first customers. Thank you so much. It was really great. It really supported me in that on my journey at that time. It was so wonderful. But it's all about being the sort of magician, if you like, or that we all are, or just that we're more empowered than we are. But for me, what I didn't realize, this is probably a whole different conversation, but what I didn't realize when I wrote that book is that it took me down the path of my second book, which is called I Love and I Forgive. Because what I didn't know, and this is really, really poignant, and I think probably applies to a lot of people, is that when you first become more conscious and aware of who you are and what you want, and then you might start looking into the laws of attraction and quantum physics or whatever, you might hit a massive wall. And I've read this about other people. I hit a massive wall. I was like, this doesn't make sense. I was meditating like so fantastically and writing poetry. I was like, this is great. And then suddenly this massive wall. And what I didn't realize, it was a wall or part of my healing journey. I had to deal with some traumas. If you've got like these subconscious traumas you're not dealing with, it massively affects the choices you make, what you attract into your life. Sometimes when you first go down this path, it actually takes you down another path, and you're like, what is going on? Oh, I didn't attract this.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt with, I'm writing my third book. I've got a lot of it written, but there was a point right before the pandemic started, I kind of felt like I hit a wall, and what am I experiencing?
Yeah.
Taking the time to work through it. Now I understand a little bit better why I needed to hit the wall, so to speak.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that, I call them setbacks. It doesn't mean that just because you experience that setback that your journey isn't working for you.
Exactly. I think, in fact, this might be a really good time to. This is a poem I wrote recently, which is going to go in the third book, or the second book, whichever way you look at it. Yeah, so I was going to say, this third book, I'm going to call it Dreams Come True.
You're republishing your book as a revised edition.
Yes, exactly.
Oh,
if I can get my screen back on, okay. Yeah, I had to do a lot of learning and healing before I could actually start making my dreams come true. And I didn't realize that at the beginning. And I think so any listeners out there who first going into journaling and law of attraction and all that, don't be put off. You may hear this over and over again, but it's a journey. It's a process. Don't give up. Never give up. It's true.
It's the same with owning a business too. I mean,
right. Yeah.
People, again, perception is reality. We look around, we think that everybody has all this success, and, I'm here, comparison syndrome. But really and truly, owning a business is a journey as well. It's not once I figure this out, then I'll be successful. It's building blocks, which I could go into science about how building blocks and molecules work together, but I will not.
That's another conversation, yeah.
Yeah. So you have something that you're putting in your third book, or your...
Okay, yeah. So it's about gratitude, and again, I learned quite a lot of this from you, because you talk about gratitude a lot. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So important. But what I didn't understand until recently is why gratitude is so important. It helps you focus, which is important. But there's kind of like a great depth to it. And I'm going to read this poem and kind of explain a bit about it, my thought process. So it's called Thank You, but the ANKH in it is Ankh, like key of life, Egyptian Ankh. Because I've been fascinated by symbols like key of life and like, what's that?
I love the Egyptian culture, like the history of the Egyptian culture.
I know, I'm fascinated by it too. And
even Native American, I'm fascinated with their history.
Oh, yeah, me too. But this key of life, I was like, well, what does it mean? What is the key of life? And if you go online and you Google it, you might see different answers, and that's okay. But for me, I think the key is gratitude, because when you're in a state of gratitude, you're in your heart space. So it literally, it opens your heart. So you could say that the gratitude is the key and opens your heart. And when you're in your heart space, you're much more empowered. Okay, I'm just going to read it really quick. Is that all right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I want to.
Okay.
I think I read it on your Facebook post yesterday, but I want the listeners to hear this for sure.
Okay, cool. So it's called Thank You. Into love we fall by thanking it all, unlocking the door that bound us before. We've opened our hearts and ready to start. With no more lockdown, we can see all around. With a lens that's clear, we can better steer and travel as one by knowing love's one. The unlocking the door, so the door being our heart, kind of looking at it from a different angle, is that when we've been through a lot of trauma and stress and heartache and goodness, we all build up barriers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Without even knowing it, don't we? We've all done that and build up an identity and protect and shield. And what we don't realize is that those barriers and protective shields actually prevent us from living our dream life.
Yeah.
We're not even aware of it until we become more conscious. But gratitude, if we thank it all, so it says into love we fall by thanking it all. Like you were saying, it's a sort of odd blessing to go through this pandemic.
Yeah.
And I know that's
like
weird,
it feels icky and kind of weird.
I know, especially for people whose loved ones have died, and there's no disrespect or anything. I obviously don't mean, but this pandemic's obviously a very extreme example of it.
Yeah.
But the obvious thing to say is that any experience in life is a lesson, and a different viewpoint on life here in this world.
What we're trying to get at here is we all go through trauma at some point in our lives. Looking back at the trauma, it's not like we're saying we would go through it again. But it's like we're thankful for it because it helped us grow and expand and learn, what, I'm not put up with this anymore, or I'm not that person because I am this person now. So that's what we mean by gratitude, not so much gratitude for experiencing it at the time.
Yes. And I think thanking it all changes your physical and your entire energy field, because especially if you put your hand on your heart, I have to say this, for me it works really, really well. If you put your hand on your heart, it takes you into your heart space, and just say like a little prayer or wish or whatever, just say thank you for you don't even have to explain it. It just somehow it shifts, and it might not work at first, but keep doing it. It's kind of hard to put into words, but
I do it too sometimes. I say, I now give myself permission to thank you for the lessons learned. Thank you that I learned this, that, ... And I say, now I give myself permission.
I think that's fantastic word, permission. Is so, in fact I wrote a poem about that as well. I love it. I love that word, because we don't grant ourselves that freedom often, do we? We don't give ourselves permission. So then it says, with no more lockdown, we can see around. With a lens that's clear, we can better steer. So the thanking it all helps you to step back from everything, because it takes away the chains of to put it in a different way, when you're angry, you're very attached to a particular outcome or judgment or something, and you want to fix it and you want to sort it and you want to beat the heck out of it and everything, and it's very disempowering. But by thanking it all, everything, the hardships and the good times, it helps you to step into that bigger picture that we were talking about.
Yeah.
And from the bigger picture, you can make much better choices.
Right.
And you're in a much calmer state, a much more peaceful state.
It's not so much emotional reaction to the circumstance.
Exactly.
Empowering choice of a decision that is best for you going forward.
Exactly. So that's where the key, or to me anyway, the key of life is gratitude, which opens your heart, because it helps you move into that space of peace and calm, so you can make rational choices. Well, maybe rational is not the right word, but better choices, maybe rational choices, calmer choices, wiser choices, more loving choices. That was a big shift for me but before I'd be like writing lists of what I'm grateful for, which was okay, but I was like, this isn't changing me much. And then I had a shift one day. I was like, well, actually, gratitude goes much deeper than that. It actually affects your entire energy and how you process life and how you manage your life. It is a big thing for me. Anyway,
I'm excited for your revamp of your
dreams come true.
Yeah. So you have your website, and then are you on any social media channels?
Yes, I'm on Instagram as Victoria_artist_poet. But I think the links are on my website, so it's probably easier to to click on that.
So then go to victoriawalkden.com, and it's WALKDEN. Like,
that's right.
Den, like walk into a den, but without
yeah.
Walkden. And it's a .com, right? .com.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
From there, people can learn more about your books and about your amazing paintings. And oh my gosh, you just wear so many hats because you're so talented. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast today and talking about how you live through the heart space and focusing on that, because I'm such a mind person, and it's so nice to be able to get an emotional connection because it's all interconnected. And like you said earlier, we all go through similar experiences. I'm just so appreciative for you coming on here. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for helping me with my journey, because it's been, there's just a handful of individuals that have quite massively impacted my life. I would say that meeting you and having you as a friend and having your books has been big parts of my journey. So I'm really grateful for you and, all your work. It's funny because when you're putting your stuff out there, be it books or movies or art or whatever, and maybe seemingly nothing's really going that fast, or you just don't know the impact that you're having on people. And I think if you're guided to write a book or create anything and to share it, if your heart's telling you that, your soul's telling you that, then do it, because impact it can have on someone's life can be really fundamental.
Oh yeah, totally. Let's feel the fear and do it anyway. Take manifestation action, because your physical vibrations of putting together what sparks you, whether it's a book or paintings or jewelry or whatever it is that you really want to do, taking those physical actions, it shows the universe, like, I mean business, like, I want to do this. Again, a setback doesn't mean that it's not working. It just means you're being redirected into an even better situation and better outcome for you. And it's a journey. It's a journey. Yeah, we say, as we're both business owners, and we say, keep going, keep doing it. Yeah, it's going to be scary at times, but just keep going, because like she said, you're impacting people and you don't even realize it. And that is the truth. Thanks so much for listening, you guys. And please go to Amazon.com and Amazon.co.uk to purchase Victoria's books. And I'm in America, so mine is, although I am in the UK, my books are also on Amazon.co.uk. And I think Victoria's, your books are on .com as well. Because when I ordered,
both. Yeah, both. Yeah.
Yeah. So either one, you can go to any of your Amazon links, really, wherever you are, and grab our books. And yeah, go to victoriawalkden.com to check out more of her amazing, amazing talents.
Move with the rhythm, shake it up, stop when the clock hits 13. Sing 1, 2, 3, 4. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it. Cause no one can do it like we do it, like we do it, like we do it.